All right, so in this game, we have Shin Jinseo playing as black, and we have Changho playing as white. And this is for the Myeongin tournament. And this game is particularly exciting because Chang-ho is basically the top player between 1996 and 2005, and we have Shin Jin-so, who is considered the top player of today. So they're kings of different periods of time. Um, but what's also really exciting is Lee Chang-ho, despite his age, he fights really, really well, and still competes really well against some of the younger and stronger players of our current generation. And this game was also particularly exciting. I won't give too many spoilers for those who haven't seen it. I just want to make everybody aware before we go into the review that I am not looking for their mistakes. They are much, much incredibly stronger than I am. They are nine. They are both 9 Dan professional, and I am just an AGA 5 Dan. So I can't entirely contribute in towards calling out their mistakes. So more so, I'm just going to be talking about some of the ideas they might have had during the game, that I think they might have been thinking, some stuff they might have been thinking, and explaining things that I might understand that some others may not understand as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So the game pretty much starts pretty standard, and we get into the flying knife over here. And what's really interesting about this flying knife is that most people may know that the flying knife is normally with this move here at E2. And we got a little bit of continuation here of kind of what you might see with the flying knife, and it's a pretty complicated variation. A lot of people actually tend to avoid this. Um, And I actually think that at the beginning, I kind of misunderstood this position in my mind because I thought that Lee Chang-ho had played this move to avoid all of the complications at this point in the game. Because I know that there are some variations here that some professionals play to avoid all those complications. But I actually think this is also very complicated because I didn't quite understand at the first why it was played. And we'll go ahead and continue here. Um, and so we can see that white chooses to play Tanuki all the way across the board. Um, and the first time that I was explaining this to somebody, I was like, yeah, there's got to be a code there or something. Like, we're probably creating code threats or something. And that is definitely not what this is. And it's actually really interesting because it's actually a ladder breaker. So we can see that if black were to respond, if they were to just respond across the board, um, white actually has this really cool attachment here, and it goes into kind of a ladder. And we can go ahead and we'll actually go ahead and play out this ladder. And we can see that this basically goes all the way down to where it becomes a ladder breaker. And that stone was basically placed almost perfectly. Um, Now, if black were to respond here, which some might think is a possibility, however, this is actually not a possibility. Um, because if we go ahead and extend here as white, and if black tries to extend this way, we get a really nice net here. And this would be very devastating for black. This would be very hard, especially since we know that black is not alive in this corner yet. Black would actually end up having to come back and make life. So this would be a very rough position. And if black tries to go out the other way, then we've got a Hane here. And these stones would also be captured, and this would also be very devastating for black. Um, Now, there are other options here as well, because we can see that when black responds, black says, I don't want to deal with any of that Aji. I do not want to deal with any of it. And they decide, I'm just going to remove it with F3. And so this is why they play this. But they also decide that the follow-ups here for white are not that devastating. So I think it's really smart that black chose to come back and just remove the Aji. And I think this is the best way to do so. Um, and now some might say, well, do we have other options? Because some people might look at this and go, is this really a good trade, right? Like we can go ahead and take a look at, what the follow-up is a little bit here. And we almost feel like this isn't almost worth it for white. However, this game's actually pretty even. I believe it's a 1 point lead for black from this position. Uh, and so we're going to go ahead and actually take a quick look at maybe what could happen if white had played something different. And this is also perfectly an option as well. White can actually play this, and they come with different kinds of follow-ups. And so if white plays this, I think personally the best response is actually to play f3, but it is also possible for black to go ahead and play j3. But the thing is, we're always going to end up in a very similar position, and black is almost always going to end up playing f3 to make sure that they capture these d3 stones. So there is technically not any good way to save those d3 stones. But what white can do is they can go ahead and create some Aji here. And so we can see that by connecting here, black doesn't really want to take this risk. And if white connects here, then we've kind of got a situation of here where white might live here, and they might have mutual life basically. Um, and then there's also the possibility that white just continues to follow up again. And then it becomes kind of even slightly better for white the further we get to push in, right? Um, However, black could also just play here immediately and just basically uh, not the Hane underneath. You would actually end up playing outside and you would aim to kind of seal black in here. And so white can also do this kind of thing. And I think this is also very possible. However, this move for white was the blue move. And this was really cool because this is not something that I would have thought of. Even though it might be standard, but for me, I was kind of cool. And so we'll go ahead and move forward here. And so this also was really cool to me. Now I know not every viewer here is. So Snake asked, why white not Hane? Do you mean here, Snake? So so black decides to or white doesn't decide to Hane because he'd rather actually that's a really good question. I'm going to guess that it's probably now you got me stumped. Why doesn't white Hane? I think that white just decided that he wanted to be able to play this side of the board, and we may end up getting something like this. Fox AI wanted Hane. I see. Hane is definitely possible. So I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. Um, it's a bad move. Hane is fine, but I think that this is also fine. Yeah, it's just a preference because we can see that if white Hanes, um, actually, I think this is the best way to say it. I think this is the best way to say it. If we play here, we are almost forcing our opponent to play here, right? Or we are forcing them to play here. And I actually think R816 is not a good move. Um, so we're almost forcing our opponent to play this way. If we Hane here, we're kind of giving black options, right? We're saying, hey, black, would you like to play this side of the board? hey, black, would you like to play the top side of the board? Um, or hey, black, would you like to go into this position, which I think is not very good for black. So I think that white chooses to play this way because he wants to force a certain position. Um, so that's not to say that this is bad, but maybe white had a preference here on what they may have wanted to play. Um, so they may have had a preference, basically. And so black chooses to follow up pretty much the way that I think was the best way. I feel like if we go in here and we try to double, or we try to hane here, we end up going into this double hane, which I think is very bad for black. So black would almost be forced to kind of go into what they did in the game, which is kind of like this, and it feels kind of uncomfortable in the corner. Um, so in a way, we're saying that when we play R15, we're forcing our opponent to play the way that we want to play. Um, and so white gets to go ahead and play here. Black chooses to come back to the corner. Basically, black is choosing not to get into this kind of thing. And so this is kind of where we're just kind of talking about. And now I know that most people may understand why black would not play this move, but I'm going to go ahead and show why we wouldn't play this move. And so it kind of goes back to the position we were looking at here, why black would not want to do this. Uh, it just kind of really gives white a really nice kind of wall on the outside, and we're not very happy on the inside. Of course, we can also try this kind of thing, but it doesn't really make the situation any better. So when we look at this position of the board and we're trying to think of, hey, can we double hane? We're kind of running into the same issue. Except in this position, it's even possibly a little worse because we give the opponent a double Atari. So black may feel that they're inclined to play like this. And this would be clearly not good for black because, again, we're really uncomfortable in that corner being sealed in like this, especially when we're giving white such a strong wall on the outside. Um, and so when we go back and we're like, okay, well, what's the next way to kind of make sure that we're in this area of the board? And so what if black plays here? Well, we're kind of running into the same issues with this. If white were to play here, there's a number of moves that black can play in response. Black can try this, but we're giving white a double tiger mouth, and they're being really solid on the outside. We could even say that connecting just solidly is also a really good option. And this would definitely be too good for white. Black doesn't really get access to the top side. There is a cut here, and it's a ladder, so maybe we have a ladder breaker later, but it's not very good to rely on that because we're really strong on the top side as white, and it's going to be really easy for us to make a base on the right side of the board. And so then maybe we go look for a cut instantly. Well, we have this Incente as white. And so black ends up having to come back and fix their weaknesses because if they try to Tanuki away, we just get to capture these two stones for free. And so instead, black has to connect this. And what we'll end up doing is we'll reinforce our top side, and black tries to come out towards the right, basically saying, "Hey, I'm going to lean on you over here." And then white just creates a nice base and tries to stay really thick. And white is just really strong on both sides. So this is really uncomfortable for black as well. It's just not a great fight. So black plays the best move here, in my opinion, um, and comes to the second line. And so now when we try to seal them in again, black also plays another really good follow-up move to make sure that everything here is strong and worth something. And so black pulls back here. And of course, if we were to drop down like this, we kind of get into that same situation where black has to come back and fix, and then we may come back and, strengthen ourselves. So black chooses to play this way, which allows uh, black to have a choice, basically. White to have a choice, basically. White can come back here and fix this way, but the position isn't as strong as it previously was, and the board's a little bit. Uh, Black's corner is a little bit stronger now, and so White actually chooses to not fix the top side. And the reason he chooses not to fix the top side is because he says, hey, if I play here, I'm not as strong as I once was. I don't feel it's worth it. I don't feel that there is value anymore in coming back and fixing it. So he chooses not to come back and play up here. Instead, he chooses to play over here. And at this point, I was actually talking with one of my students about this move because they had asked me why does white not come out to the right side of the board? And they asked me why does white play this instead? Um, and he felt that was because that or he felt like black was getting the better here. And now I did look at this and uh so AI actually does say that this is better by like 0.1 basically. So it is true that white could come over here and end up in this position, but I think that the reason that Lee Chang-ho chose to play here instead is because Lee Chang-ho is a very thick player. He likes playing very thick, and then he likes attacking from his thickness. And so I believe that he chose to play this way because he wanted to be thick. And I think he anticipated that Shin Jinseo would eventually come into this top side of the board, and he would then use his thickness to attack Shin Jinseo, which we do kind of get to see quite a bit of later. And so I think it's that he chose specifically this way because it's his style. And so we can see now that black decides to come over here and take the right side of the board this time. And white went and played this really cool move. Um, and I was trying to actually think of why he would play this move. Um, and we obviously know it's to protect this cutting point. And so I think that it's actually really cool. It's not the best move to protect the cutting point. I checked with AI, and AI believes that this is probably the best move to protect the cutting point. But I thought this idea was really interesting, and I wanted to try to think about what White may have been thinking here. And so we can go into the cutting here. If Black chooses to cut, what some people might be thinking is good for Black, and what ends up happening is that this is a very big mistake for Black, and White becomes incredibly thick on the left side of the board. This would be a very, very powerful result for White. Uh, Now, I don't believe that Lee Chang-ho thought that Black was going to cut instantly. Um, so the reason that I actually think he chose to play this move over this move is because it goes back to this lower left thing over here. Um, I think White chose to play this because he wanted to be very thick when Shin Jinseo chose to invade. And I kind of believe that M14 was a way of saying I am protecting my cutting point, but I also dare you to come into my area over here, and I will use my strength with the stones that I have created, all this thickness, and I'm going to use that to either reduce you to a very small group or kill you. Um, and that's almost kind of what happened. But we'll get to that. Hold on, I'm getting lost. Uh, okay. Sorry, I added notes beforehand and I got lost a bit in my notes. Um, so black plays this really, really cool move. Um, and I wanted to explain this move because I feel like a lot of people look at this and they're like me and they don't understand why black would play like this. You might commonly see in games where players will play something like this if they want to go for the top side, or they'll play this if they want to go for the left side. That makes complete sense. However, there's a problem here. Shin Jinseo wants to do both. He wants to go for the top side and he wants to go for the left side. And this is a very powerful move that allows that kind of thing. And a lot of people don't understand how. So let's go ahead and start by playing this move. And so we can see what ends up happening is that white chooses to build this side of the board. So we're only attacking the top side, or we're taking the top side. And so what happens if we play d13 instead, the other one? We can see that in this way, white chooses to build the top side rather than the left side. So we can see that maybe that these responses are not exactly what we might want. So black plays here, and this is a cool. It's cool to even think about how white may respond here, because we can see that if we play here, it's kind of strange, right? We if we play here, it's kind of strange because we're so far away from the black stone. So we're like, yeah, we're growing on the top side of the board, but it's almost like we're just being really passive. There's no fighting spirit there. We're not really gaining with this move. We're just basically conceding points. So if white wants to play the top side, they now have to play this move. But there is a problem with this move now. That leaves Aji up here, which means that black can later do something like this. And so what ends up happening is black chooses to play here now. And again, what's really cool is that black can say, "Hey, I can now lean on you on the left side of the board, and I will have Aji to come to the top side later." And we actually end up seeing that later as well. As to where if white decided that they wanted to try to build the left side, we can kind of do the same thing here. And we can say, hey, I've still got room in here to reduce later if I need to, because we can say, we can go ahead and lean, right? White would have to fill more moves here to kind of reinforce that area of the board. Um, so black chooses to lean in this direction. And again, we talked about how white had Li Changho had preferred all this thickness, and that he's now trying to get his stones to really, really work together, so he can now attack anything that Shin Jinseo would jump in with. Thank you for the raid, Mikko, and welcome to the stream. And welcome, Raiders. We are going over the Shin Jinseo versus Li Changho game. And so we can see that white is attacking the Blackstones very, very offensively, very aggressive. And that's what also made this game so exciting, because you don't often get to see these type of games in professional play. It's not common where you get to see such aggressive play. And I remember it watching this game, it almost looked like Shin Jinseo was sweating at one point. And so we go ahead and play out some moves here. And so we see that black is choosing to posture. Now, I did check with AI, and this is not the best move, but I think that black is posturing for good shape to start attacking at f17. So he is preparing to launch an attack. And I actually believe that um, White even knew, I believe that Lee Chang-ho even knew that Shin Jinseo was planning to come in at 17. And so I believe that Black started preparing his attack right now. And White started preparing his splitting attack right here. Basically saying, hey, if you come into the top side, I am going to surround you. And I think this move is also very amazing by White. I think it's very cool. And so we can see that Shin Jinseo now plays in the top side. And I thought this was also absolutely crazy because I would have never done this. I would have been so terrified for all of my little stones here. I would not be very confident in living with them. Now, I wouldn't know the best way to attack them, but I think Lee Chang-ho does a really good job at working his way on surrounding those. And so White chooses to basically pincer Black, and he's kind of looking to strengthen these stones. He probably knows at this point that Black is going to live, but he wants to make it so it is as difficult as possible because the more difficult it is for this stone, the stronger these white stones are going to become to attack this outside group. But Shinjin So is very strong, and he does not make that easy for Lee Chang-ho. And so Black comes out into here. And now we can see that White says, now it's time for me to uh, try to attack you on the outside now. And I thought this move at first was crazy because I didn't quite understand it myself. I thought that Black could just do this and go into kind of like this co-shape. Um, but also at the same time, even though I thought that this was my thoughts, it actually turned out that this is actually really good for White to even just sacrifice this stone. Um, and then basically launch an attack on the top stones. However, that is not the way that Lee Chang-ho chooses to play or the way that Shin Jinseo chooses to play. Black chooses to play L11 first, and White follows up. Also, to add to this, if White were to play this, White could also play this way. If Black responds here, White will respond here, and Black connect here, and basically White kind of surrounds. Um, and in this way, Black would be able to kind of connect up through here. So it is very complicated. It is not very straightforward. Um, and we can kind of see that the same thing happens here, except Black has an extra helping stone in this situation compared to before. Helping stones are very important, and Black chooses to get this move in as soon as possible. And so White chooses to be really strong. Some players may believe that White could just play here, but the problem is that if Black goes ahead and plays here, it's really difficult to disconnect the top stones from the center stones. And if they connect up, the game is pretty much just simply in Black's favor. So White has to be very careful every move of the way and make sure that they are um, keeping these stones split. So White chooses to play here. And there's a good reason that White chooses to play this way because these are not the only stones that White is thinking about. Lee Chang-ho is thinking about a lot more than these stones here. He's thinking far ahead. He is also thinking about this stone here, this lone stone way out here. And you'll get to see how he thinks about that. Now, the next part of the game was a little bit too complicated even for me. Um, Black chooses to come back here, which I thought was really scary. I would again be very afraid of coming back and trying to surround, getting surrounded here. But again, Shin So probably knows what he's doing. And so Lee Chang-ho chooses to poke here first, basically reducing any potential Aji if Black decides to play something like a Hane here. um, and to just sacrifice the inside or something. That is my guess as to why White may be playing this right now. And so White plays this Tiger's Mouth, uh, trying to attack this top shape, saying, hey, you're not completely alive. Black says, I'm going to escape. We'll go ahead and skip forward a little bit. And now we can see the kind of the attachment here. And so now we can see that White is finally saying, hey, you're going to give up something. You have to give up something. And so White leans on this stone. And so now we can see that if Black tries to just simply escape with this stone, it's very hard to handle living with this group. And so White can play something like this. And basically, it is very difficult for Black to come back and make life right away. Um, and there's also the possibility that White leans even more heavily on this stone and it becomes a bigger sacrifice. So Black says, hey, I've counted the game, which I think is also really cool when it comes to professional players and uh, at how precisionally they can count. Because I would also be very afraid, looking at the game, I would also be very afraid to give up this stone. Um, but Shin Jinseo says, I think that I can sacrifice that stone if need be and play here and just save my center. Plus, it is probably better for him to just simply save the center rather than the right side stone anyway. And so White chooses to play here, which I also think is a really amazing move because some might think that White can just hade here, but this leaves a lot more aji. There's a lot more cutting points, obviously. We got a lot of options that Black could do here, possibly. And so White chooses to play this way. And this move also has another amazing effect is that we're still surrounding or threatening to surround all of these stones with this move. And so Black can't really, sorry, Black can't really come back and try to build with this stone because we're still at risk of dying with these stones. So Black says, okay, if I'm going to sacrifice these stones, I'm going to do my best to get as much as possible out of them. And so we can see that White continues to surround. And here is where I think that Black started to gain kind of a like a really strong lead. Um, if you watched the game live, I remember Lee Changho looking kind of shaking his head almost when he played this move because it sucks to play it. It is a move that you feel like you don't want to play, but you kind of have to. So he went ahead and played here. And if we don't play this and we try to continue to surround here, Black can get this very powerful double Hane move. And we can't allow Black to play this way. So White chooses to simply respond. Black connects. We have to keep our eye on this group over here. This is the iconic group that we are going to pay a lot of attention to, and things are going to get really, really complicated really fast around this group. So we're going to keep our eye on this group over here as we go through the next couple moves. The rest, I mean, but everything that happens here is pretty standard. It's a lot of escaping and just a lot of following. And so we can see that Black chooses to invade now. And I really wanted to grasp and try to understand this corner here because when I was watching it, I saw the AI graph just going crazy. I saw the AI graph going absolutely nuts. And I wanted to try to understand what was happening in this corner. And unfortunately, I could not. I tried with all my might to understand what the AI was telling me. And from my understanding is it had no idea itself. But basically, what ends up happening here is we get into this and I'm just going to go ahead and keep skipping ahead a little bit. And so what ends up happening is we kind of start to notice that a triple co comes about. And I know the game's going a little fast now. Most of what I wanted to go over was in the opening, but I do want to at least show you guys what the triple co looks like, because it is something that doesn't happen very often, especially in a game as exciting as Lee Changho and Shin Jinseo. And so we can see that um, here we end up getting into the triple co situation. And I believe that both players actually knew the game was over at this point. I believe that both players knew that this game was going to end in basically a draw, no matter what. And for those that don't understand, basically there's a triple co rule where if you repeat the same position uh, over and over and over again uh, without stopping, the game ends in a draw. And I know that the players said in an interview that they didn't see this coming, but I believe that at this point they did realize that the game was over, but they did continue to play the rest of the game through. Um, Now, I assume that the way that they're looking at it is if they could find a outside co to utilize a trade that might end the triple co, and then the game will not end. But at any moment, the players can start just taking the co over and over and over again, and it leads to a triple co draw, basically, which I'll go ahead and show you guys here towards the end of the game. So we'll go ahead and speed up to the ending here. And so at this point, we can basically see that black is not alive on the outside. And I actually had some people ask me questions about this. They're like, why didn't white just start taking from, well, I mean, why didn't white just kill the outside group? So the problem with that is that white is always at risk of dying if he doesn't respond to black's move. So when black takes the stone, white now has to take this stone. But now because black is at risk of dying, black has to take this stone. But now white is at risk of dying again. So he's got to take this stone. But then black's at risk of dying, so he's got to take this stone. And you kind of get into this repetitive, repeated situation. So how can white go and start filling liberties if he's always at risk of dying? Um, So white cannot actually go and start taking liberties on the outside. Otherwise, black would be dead, and white would obviously win the game. But since he can't take liberties, that's why the triple co rule comes in, and it's becomes a draw. Um, and so that's pretty much how this game ended. Now there is a game two, and so what happens is when the game is decided as a draw, both players have to replay another game or a second game pretty much almost immediately. Um, and now we're not going to go over that game here. I will be making a second YouTube video on that one as well. And this was just the first game, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. I thought it was really cool to see Lee Chang-ho versus Shin Jinseo. And I'm very excited to go over the second one. I actually haven't seen the second one yet, so I'm very excited to go over that one as well. All right, and thank you guys for watching.